Okay, in this video, what I wanted to sort of discuss is since they announced the shutdown, which in most states it was second week in March, maybe third week in March, and we're heading into our second or third week, depending on where you live in the country, of the shutdown. Now in Alabama and well in New Mexico, I know the governor today just extended the proclamation that the schools will not open, but did not cancel the school year. So whereas the marker was April 3rd, sort of make a decision, that's been extended. Now in Alabama, it's just closed for the remainder of the school year. The end date of school was moved until the end of the first week in March, I mean in June, but that is to give kids enough cushion during this time that it was just closed. And you sit there and you go, well, what do you mean to where they extended the school year to June 5th, I believe, when it was supposed to end the week prior to Memorial Day. All right, so they've added another 2 weeks to school, basically. Now, why did they do that? Well, because when there was the declared emergency and the governor basically said the schools do not have to make up those days because Alabama, just like every other state, has a compulsory education act. Then once that emergency declaration was declared, the schools don't have to go back and make up those days. And because they didn't have to make up those days, and because they already made the proclamation that nobody was to work during this time period. Now, do I know for a fact that some schools continue to serve their kids? Yes, I do know that was going on. And I don't fault that, guys. If there's teachers that I know that were at home, case managers that were still working with their students, then bravo. It's better to ask forgiveness than permission sometimes, and especially if you work for government. So in that regard, do I know that there were teachers out there continuing to work with their students before getting the okay or the blessing from the higher ups in government? Absolutely. And we should appreciate that. Okay. But most schools were given the order not to do a thing, not to serve general ed. And if they didn't serve general ed, they didn't have to serve special education. Okay. What this did, I mean, it was stupid in my viewpoint because at that same time, they weren't very good and transparent about communicating. Because they weren't good about communicating, then that allowed for all the rumors to start, and that allowed for people to sit there and start asking James, what's going on and what's going to happen? Didn't really have an answer for you because I knew that there were things going on behind the scenes, task force called, them discussing. I sort of figured they weren't going to reopen the school, but I didn't know definitively until today. So why is April 6th the marker? Well, because that's the end of the stated emergency. That is the end of that time period that the governor said that they don't have to make up the days. That's why they ended up extending that end date to June 5th, so that kids would have sufficient time to make their credits and fulfill the obligations, which also, if that's the end date of school, that also means that that's probably when most of your IEPs, if you have implementation dates starting in August, that will be the time period that you would feasibly extend your IEP, okay? Which could, I think that you should agree to those kind of reasonable extensions. And I've said this in other video, guys. Don't be a jerk. Be a partner during this time. This hit everybody by surprise. Be collaborative. Come to the table with some ideas. You know your child better than they do. You know your child in a home environment. Do not act panicked. Do not be a jerk, please. Come to the table with ideas. If your child needs support in learning, if your child needs, these are things that we're just going to have to figure out together. They don't have some manual that they dusted off, said what to do during a pandemic for special education. In fact, I don't know if a manual like that exists. This is our first one. This is my first one. This is my first pandemic. Ooh. So I think it's all of our first pandemic. So congratulations. We are going to make it through it, it looks like. All right. But that's what the end date is, okay? That's what all of that's for, which means that the reason that things that they sort of have April 6th as that marker is that's when services are supposed to start moving forward. All right. And I'm talking about finding ways to serve all of our kids. Every school district is going to be different. It's not going to be uniform because there is a vast difference. And I don't care if it's New Mexico. I don't care if it's Alabama. Same standard, guys. Tennessee, Georgia, rural counties, poor districts, urban city, suburbs, they all have different technology capabilities and already use different approaches with their students. Do not expect the same format. It won't happen. And so this is where you've got to be understanding. If you live out in the middle of nowhere and there's just not broadband, then yes, you're going to get treated like it's 1985. And believe me, it's going to be purely and absolutely appropriate for them to find a way to serve your child during that point per the available resources and capabilities. That will be the standard. Why? Because of the health and safety factor of the declared emergency. That's why. Okay? And so this is where you can't sit there and say, well, I wasn't treated the same way. Well, because you don't live in the same area as these other places. But you can't sit there and say, and I know that there may be some people that disagree with me, but this is a reality whether there was a pandemic or not. You can't sit there and say that the kids in Coffee County have the same access to education, the same access to technology as they do, for example, in Vestavia or Mountain Brook or Hoover or Madison City. It is such starkly different with regards to accessibility to technology, and some of these schools have moved completely over to technology instead of textbooks. So I don't find it discriminatory. It is what it was before the pandemic. It's just that now that we're in the situation, then it's got to be addressed but that's all going to start April 6th. Right there. You can't go, well, what's going to happen Monday, the 31st? Nothing. It was still part of the declared emergency. But you should be proactive and you should reach out to your case manager. And your case manager, if you're depending on the size of your school, it could be your child's special education teacher. But go ahead, be proactive, guys, but don't be a jerk. Be proactive. And you sit there, well, watch my next video because I'm going to sit there and explain what you need to do if you're one of those parents that live in a school system where they're not that receptive and they're not that responsive, okay? I'm going to tell you what you need to do to hold your school accountable, okay?